very eye-opening. Being recorded. On the first stat there, 1 in 50 URLs is malicious. So a URL is a uniform resource locator. It's the link, it's the internet address, it's the web address that you type in to your browser. So 1 in 50 are malicious. Take a look at some of these other stats, using HTTPS to appear secure, hypertext transfer protocol secured. Nearly 33% of phishing sites will use a secure connection to make you think that there's something legitimate about the site.
Brian, let me just have Mark jump in there. Mark, with the secure sites, I know that we looked into that as well. Could you help explain what that means and how they scammers come up with ways to get those certifications to trick people?
Sure. I mean, there's a number of certificates that websites can get, and when you visit a site and you see the little padlock in the corner, what that's telling you is that your session with the site you're visiting is secure. So all the information going back and forth is not able to be seen by anybody else. Now, essentially, if you go to twitter.com and you see that lock, you know that you're visiting twitter.com. But some bad actors these days are finding ways to circumvent the certificate authorities' validation methods so that they can, in a sense, certify their websites. So when this malware redirects, or when they successfully have somebody click on a link, the visitor sees that lock and they feel a sense of reassurance. But really, that's just a secure connection to a malicious website.
Thanks, Mark. And Brian, how is that? How do most of the bad actors get access, and why is this important with business? I think we can see on the bottom there.
Yeah, well, let's talk about phishing. And most of the encounters here stem from phishing emails sent to a business's employees. Phishing is a type of cyber scheme where you receive an email trying to convince you to provide information that would otherwise be private, asking you for your username or your login, or getting you to click a link where you would enter your username or login. That's called phishing. And there's several other scams similar to phishing that have become quite pronounced during this period. A number of them, using a text message, an SMS message to receive a link on your smartphone. Smishing, that's called. There's also spear phishing, where you have a targeted number of folks that are being sent a message by someone who they would know, trying to get action from a small group of employees. This is really the issue, is that folks are being a little less, especially working from home, you're a little less likely to use those extra precautions that you might rely on in the office. So, here's what we're finding. I mean, you're seeing the research is showing that the amount of malware that businesses are being exposed to is just astronomical. I mean, you have more than 2/3 of workers receiving phishing emails. 35% of workers claiming that they know they've been hacked, but still don't change their passwords. And folks who, don't think twice about clicking links while at work, from folks that they don't know. And a lot of these phishing emails, the links you're clicking, they're bringing you to websites that are downloading Trojan viruses onto your computers or into your smartphones. They're harvesting data. They have anti-detection features that make it very hard for your at-home virus protection software to catch. So, what we're recognizing now, this is just the baseline. This is pre-COVID-19. This is before the coronavirus shutdown. This is before working from home. But some of the statistics, and I wrote some down. One study found that since the shutdowns in the past couple weeks, hacking and phishing attempts are up over 600%. The Washington Post this morning puts out a weekly cybersecurity blog. Some of the quotes, quote, unprecedented number of online scams. This is a scary one. This is, quote, the first event of its kind since the birth of the internet, the COVID pandemic, working from home, social distancing, these shutdowns, stay-at-home orders. And there's an again, quote, explosion in cybercrime. So really what we want to focus on is how to protect yourself while you're, generally, but especially while you're working at home. We want to talk about some of the things to be on the lookout for, some of the more prominent types of scams that are out there, and to just make you a little more cautious when you're clicking on links searching for information about COVID-19.
Right. And Brian, just so as the pandemic has increased, obviously, in everybody's home, what you see is that cyber scammers are not exactly good people, and they're taking advantage of the anxieties and the fears that people have in this time where you're looking for information, you want to feel secure, and you may see something that is like, hey, get this great information here about, the pandemic, but really it's a cyber threat. And I just flipped over to the next slide. If you could just start talk through what we've started to see there on the coronavirus related malware sites.
Yeah, so for 100%, absolutely. So what New Jersey has been seeing, the target, a lot of state employees, state agencies are being targeted. And the majority of these threats are coronavirus-themed messages, phishing scams that include attachments or links to sites that are going to install Trojan viruses. So since, one of the things that New Jersey researchers found is since January 2020, over 4,000 coronavirus-related domains have been registered. And that's as of the date of this research, within the past few weeks, what you can count on is you will receive a phishing email, and your employees will receive phishing emails. And you need to be extra vigilant, and you need to reach out to your folks and let them know during this time, these are the coronavirus-themed websites, emails, links. You need to use extra caution when clicking or visiting those. There are certain websites, cdc.gov. You can go to look up Johns Hopkins University, because as Nick mentioned, there are specific scams. The number one scam is the Johns Hopkins University live.
Brian, real quick, before we get to the Johns Hopkins, I just wanted to point out that we have in the PowerPoint we've embedded a handful of links, and I'm using our little laser pointer there to the cyber.nj.gov. is where we've pulled a lot of information. Most of the states where people reside should have that, and we can help compile some additional sites. But the cyber.nj.gov is definitely one that you should be aware of if you're in New Jersey, as it's a good source of information. And sorry, so continue, Brian.
No, absolutely. And just to follow up on Nick's point, if anybody does have a question and they want to send us a question afterwards about their particular state and what type of guidance is out there with respect to cybersecurity, just send us a note afterwards. We're happy to interact with you. So again, the New Jersey Cybercrime Institute, NJKIC, has noted an increase in the COVID-19 cyber threats, and the 8 of the top 10 phishing campaigns in the past few weeks have been COVID-19 related. So I'm talking about this Johns Hopkins University live map. This is the number one resource that the media has been focusing on. It shows the current number of cases, who's tested positive, how many people have recovered, where the hotspots are. There's a fake version of this map being passed along via email, and there are links where essentially it's downloading onto your system or onto your device an Azure Trojan, which is a virus that it's a long-standing, it's been around for a long time, but it's a unique version of this virus that hides in the background. downloads information from your phone, harvests data, passwords, chat histories. I mean, you think about the things that you're chatting with, whether you're a law firm, an accounting firm, a corporation, your employees. Chats are susceptible to this. Cookies, what websites you visited. It's if you want to get the best information, you need to go to the source directly and not rely on an email that you're.
And if you do put in a Google search and you pull up something, make sure that you've spelled the name and that the website is what it should be, because a lot of times they'll manipulate a letter here or there to confuse and to trick people. So.
And just one other note, we mentioned on this slide a Loki bot Trojan. A Loki bot Trojan is a Trojan virus that it's relatively new. It was first seen in February of 2016, and Android devices and Android OS are particularly susceptible to this, and its anti-detection features make it very, very hard to identify. Really, the first feature, the first instance that you might realize you've been infected is you start seeing ads either on your phone or on your computer. You have no idea where these ads are coming from or why you're seeing them. That's a good, give you the idea that you might actually be infected with a Loki bot Trojan. And again, these are spread. Avoid the phishing alerts. These are spread through emails. Folks preying on people who are looking for information or who have anxiety about what's going on. And it's really hoping that folks are going to click on links, open attachments, and then forward them to their colleagues or friends. So again, as Nick mentioned, use trusted sources. Make sure you're going to the actual site, not
relying on the links in
correct.
And then the one other point that we have here for the avoid the phishing lures is just make sure that you're not responding to email solicitations for personal financial information. You always want to pick up the phone and make sure that you have the right person if you get an unsolicited email. And there have been a lot of scams. I've noticed PayPal recently, telling me my account was, disabled or something like that, and to reply to an email. I noticed in the past week. So a lot of anything that's requesting your personal information, just be extremely wary of.
Right. Let me just mention as well, just on that point. This was announced on Monday in New Jersey. The state attorney general's office has convened a COVID-19 task force to go after these bad actors. I mean, cybercrime included, but any type of scam that might be out there with respect to COVID-19. The state of New Jersey has convened a task force specifically targeting the bad actors who are putting forth these schemes. Just thought it was worth mentioning that, and certainly we'll be following that with interest to see what happens.
Thanks, Brian. I just wanted to, at this point, give out the first CLE code, which is phishing with a PH. So that's going to be on your CLE form to get the CLE credit. Code 1 is phishing, and I'm going to put that in the group chat right now. Now we're going to segue into lawyers working from home and what the ethical obligations are. And Brian, again, let's talk about what the ethical obligations are.
Well, I sit on the New Jersey Supreme Court District Ethics Committee, so I can tell you this is going to be of paramount concern, not just to lawyers, but to their clients and to courts, to make sure that during this unprecedented period, attorneys are following their ethical responsibilities. There's going to be a few model rules and comments that are put up on the slides here, but I just want to quickly go over, I think, the 5 rules that attorneys need to be focused on during this period. Write them down, have them in front of you, make sure you are remembering these. Rule 1.1, competence. The lawyer shall provide competent representation, which requires the legal knowledge, skill, thoroughness, and preparation reasonably necessary for a representation. And certainly that includes, as the slide makes clear, keeping up with relevant technology, understanding how emails work, understanding how your firm's remote systems work, understanding the importance of saving information into a secure location that your firm is providing. Another rule, 1.3, diligence. Lawyers shall act with reasonable diligence and promptness in representing a client, and that is effective even while you're working at home. Certainly what constitutes reasonable diligence is going to be a matter of discussion, but certainly stay on top of your cases, stay in touch with your clients and with the courts, and make sure that you're moving these cases forward. Rule 1.4 is communication. You need to explain a matter to the extent reasonably necessary to allow a client to make an informed decision about the representation. And that goes hand in hand with confidentiality. The client must give informed consent before any information related to the representation is disclosed, including documents, including electronic documents. Be extra careful when you're saving your client's documents to a computer system. Rule 1.15, safekeeping property. Client's property includes their electronic data, so just be careful there. Really, the inadvertent disclosure of client information, there are ethical concerns. You need to contact your client. You need to discuss the options with your client if it happens, but certainly be proactive. You know, the best practices in this instance really come down to making sure that you have developed a plan, that you have a plan in place, not just to comply with the rules of professional conduct, but to implement a responsible work from home policy, making sure that you have, again, plans, procedures for responding to data breaches, understanding that you need to be on top of your employees. You need to make sure that your employers are doing proper conflict checks. You need to stay up to date on your deadlines. You need to make sure that there are no eavesdroppers, family, anybody who may be in your house. Smart speakers, also be very careful when you're discussing with a client in front of a smart speaker. And just for firm management, consistent and effective supervision of your attorneys and your staff will go a long way to helping you and your firm comply with your ethical obligations. And just the overall number one thing to keep in mind is just take the time to get it right. Think it through, and that goes for whether you're going to open an email, whether you're going to open an attachment, whether you're going to have a conversation about your client from your living room. Take the time to get it right, and if you have questions or are uncertain about what to do, don't hesitate to reach out to us. I mean, that's part of this, why we're here with this webinar, to kind of lay out for you some information and let you know we're here if you have questions.
And internally reach out to a professional like your IT people, the chain of command. We're spoiled with Mark here, but I'm sure the companies that you're working with have, you know, highly specialized IT professionals who can answer questions. And it's always better to be safe than sorry. I think we had on the slide there, average data breach cost was an incredible amount of money. So next we're going to get into telework and discuss telework issues and recommendations. Mark, I think you were going to talk about some of the policies here.
Sure. So when planning on a remote setup, one of the important things you have to think about is developing a policy to kind of define the scopes, the roles, the responsibilities. What's going to be available in the remote system that's critical to the business, and what kind of data are you going to allow for your remote employees to access? One thing to keep in mind is while employees are working remotely, it's very important to maintain the same level or a higher level of security that you maintain for the data in the office. Clients are expecting you to, protect their data on a day-to-day basis, and that extends to remote work. So policies need to be in place to instruct users or employees on what they should do and what they should not do when working remotely, because that can be very different working in the office versus working at home. One thing that comes to mind are simple things like printing. In the office, you could print information. You're in secure physical workspaces. However, in the home, once you have a print job coming off of the system network, and now it's coming through on your personal network out of your personal printer, what happens to that physical copy? How is it being handled? And these are things that need to be defined. One of the important items that need to be defined in the policy. Policies also need to take into consideration employment laws and firm policies.
Just because people are working from home doesn't mean that they're not entitled to vacation time. I think one of our employment folks told us that you still have to comply with your guidelines there. If people are working 7 hours, whatever the requirement is for the given position, they're still entitled to take their vacation days. They're still entitled to do that, regardless of if their location now is not in a physical office.
That's right. And then also, on top of the security and maintaining security in the remote environment, it's also identifying key roles within the company. Certain job functions cannot be done remotely. They need to be identified, maybe workarounds put into place, and certain responsibilities that are carried out inside the office. They just, you have to have a plan on how they're going to be carried out in a remote setup situation like we're in now, especially an extended remote setup, because we're used to working from home on a Friday. That's common, but there's different considerations when there's prolonged working remotely after a month, 2 months. This is something that's kind of uncharted territories, and we're going to be learning a lot of things after this pandemic is finally over.
And Mark, back when you and I started, we had our own, your firm issued BlackBerry. That's not really the case anymore. Can you just walk through some of the issues that you have with the use of everybody seems to be using their own personal devices these days? I know I am doing the webinar from my own MacBook. So
that's a good point. So another thing to consider when designing remote setups, or even just looking at your existing remote setup, is there has to be a difference between company-owned devices and personally owned devices. So the system you have in place has to address both scenarios. With a company-owned device, be it a laptop, mobile device, different ways of connecting to the office should be used. You'd be, with a managed laptop, you would allow somebody to be able to access network resources, maybe download files to an encrypted laptop that's managed by the company. But when working with personal devices, which is very common these days, the type of remote systems that are used would need to be some type of secure remote desktop is one example, Citrix, where there is a level of separation between the employee's home environment and the systems that they're connecting to.
One of the only stocks that's performing pretty well since this pandemic started, I think, is Citrix.
Citrix is a common one. For example, we hear the term VPN a lot on the news these days, virtual private networks. VPNs are secure connections from your home or from a remote device into your systems. That would be something used on a company managed device. You would not want to have a secure tunnel from somebody's personal laptop that's used in the house into the company network. That's essentially the same as taking your home laptop and just plugging it into the LAN at your office. If you have any viruses, malware, anything that falls outside of the approved scope of software to be run on the internal network, that now you just introduce that into your network, and it could be a real security problem.
So what's the type of system that you would use if somebody is going to log in through their own personal device?
So I would suggest a setup like Citrix, secure access using remote desktop. For smaller businesses, there's other software out there and systems such as LogMeIn, TeamViewer, and they can be configured to have not allow a user to download from their remote session and not allow them to upload from their local computers into the into the environment.
And what's the extra layer of security that you put in for remote access? I know that we use Duo.
Oh, so for another must these days, something that's considered mandatory is multi-factor authentication. So going back to what Brian was discussing before, phishing emails are all over the place, and they're really trying to get users to give up information such as passwords. One of the biggest ways you can protect against this is multi-factor authentication. So when somebody goes to log in to a remote system, in addition to their password, they have to provide an additional code. A lot of the newer technologies out there, one is Okta, Duo, where the user would receive a push notification on their mobile device and they have to approve it. So even if somebody, made a mistake, they released their password, and the bad actor tried to log in to this person's remote system, after they enter the password, the real user is going to get an alert on their device, and they can simply just disapprove it or deny it, and that access would be denied.
I put the CLE code 1 phishing in the notes as well. I'm not sure if everybody's able to view the chat if I post something in the chat, so it's in the notes if you've missed that. Just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. And you've already covered the VPNs and what they are. So we can move ahead. And David, we have a lot of financial services clients. We do a lot of financial services work, and we're frequently interacting with FINRA. So we thought it would be helpful to walk through some of FINRA's guidance relatively recently with remote access and with a lot of employees switching to remote access now. And David, could you just walk through some of FINRA's guidance?
Sure. So FINRA, like a lot of regulators, are issuing notices to their regulated entities regarding the importance of maintaining systems, cybersecurity protocols, and disaster recovery protocols to ensure that their systems are up and running and employees are working on projects and the operations are still going forward with the level of control consistent with your typical in-office schemes. And this is a primary concern, not just FINRA. FINRA's guidance is typical of a lot of other entities. But if you look at this slide, the key takeaway of any guidance is the top two and the bottom one. It's about training staff. Training is the most important tool you have in cybersecurity. We've gone through a lot of different technological protocols and controls that you can have to lessen the chances of a cybersecurity incident. But the key things that are happening are these old school types of grifts. What we look at cybersecurity, it's really an application of an old fraud to a new technology. They're going to try to prey on people and your employees on their concerns, anxiety, and their willingness and the human nature to be helpful. You're going to see emails coming across to your employees that might or might not be legitimate, asking for to appear to be from legitimate sources, asking for information. Joe, can you get that file for me? We're working on something. We got to get it out to the client immediately. And it might appear to be a legitimate source, but looking a little closer, it's obviously a phishing attack, a spear phishing attack directed at you, using information that hackers and criminals have mined in order to get specific information from you in a targeted way. So training your employees to be cognizant of those issues, to primarily take the time to consider what they're doing, take the time to think about responding. In this stressful environment, we're all feeling it. You want to focus on your work while the rest of the world might be burning down. People find that connection to their work and getting things done for client, being productive is the best way to kind of get that out of your mind. And cyber criminals are going to take advantage of that. So they'll want you to send those immediate emails. I need this right now. I need this immediately, to prey on that concern that employees have. So going out to your employees, making sure that they're aware of these situations. Working in the remote environment just raises that because of the informality behind it. Where you're in the office, you feel the structure of the business. You feel the structure of the fellow employees around. You have access to people to ask questions. Maybe you're using the phone more often when you're in the office. In this environment, they're going to use the electronic communications to pretend to be somebody else, to impersonate somebody else is the potential. It's always best to stop, pick up the phone, confirm the information with that individual that you're getting the email from. And it's very prevalent during this time period. You'll see emails from people you think you trust or you do trust. It will appear that it's from them, and they'll tell you on the phone, I never sent that email. You've just been the potential victim of a phishing scam.
And they're
these
so
are all very real
now.
concerns.
David, they're so sophisticated now that the emails they can hack into somebody's account and it will be their actual email, right? I mean, haven't we started to see that?
Yes, that's exactly right. That's a real common scheme. And remember, this isn't you don't have, in order to be a cyber criminal in this environment, you don't have to have any technical expertise at all. You could pick up the phone and call somebody and pretend to be somebody from a court. Well, I've looked through the court filings. I know that you have a case with Judge so-and-so. I could pretend to call from that judge's chambers demanding information about a file that you have on a trust and estate matter or whatnot. And if I get a secretary on the phone, even if I get an associate or a partner, I can dupe those individuals to giving me or emailing me that information to an email address I provide. It's that simple because they're preying on that concern and that immediacy that you feel you need to address issues that come across at work. Right now in this environment, they're going to prey on that more and more and more because they know you're stressed out. They know you're outside that typical environment where you feel more secure. You're working from home. The emails, like Nick said, it could look like it's from joe@bressler.com or joe@whatever.com. And it's definitely possible, and these are common attacks, that your counterparty that you're conducting a deal with, their systems have been hacked. An individual has infiltrated their systems, pretending to be the person that you contact regularly through email. And what they do is they end up, since they have total control, they forward all the legitimate emails to their email address so they can track the communications that you're having over years or months about a deal. And then all of a sudden you get an email, looks like it's from Joe, and it says, you know what, we changed our mind. We want you to wire that $1 million for the auto dealership deal. Why don't you, here's the wiring instructions. And then you sit there and, gee, I've been working with Joe for 20 years. We've never wired before. And then you have to sit there and think about, wait, these wiring instructions to a bank in Florida, why, we're in New York. What's going on? It's that time to stop, pick up the phone, address it over the phone.
And this could be even more prevalent now, and is more important now because you can have people using coronavirus and COVID-19 as an excuse. Oh yeah, I know I usually get the check, but given what's happening now, it's probably just easier for you to wire that money to my bank in Cyprus.
Yes, and now that we're all remote, people and your vendors are all under stress to get paid. They have to pay their employees. They have overhead they have to pay, so they're sending out bills. They're contacting your billing staff. Sometimes those bills are fake invoices. And this is just an old school grift that you send a fake invoice to somebody via email, And if you're not training your billing staff to look at the source of this bill or to reconfirm with whoever authorized the bill, you end up sending the payment out without thinking about it, or wire it out, it's gone.
Yeah, that's a key takeaway. The training needs to be from top to bottom of the organization. Mark can put together the best protocol and policy, but if only, your senior management is reviewing it, you're still going to be extremely vulnerable.
That's right, because what people traditionally thought of cybersecurity and IT really as an IT issue, that, Mark from IT, he deals with cybersecurity stuff I'm not really concerned about. The problem is it's become so sophisticated and so broad. Cybersecurity has to be an enterprise issue where every employee is trained and knowledgeable about the concerns of your institution and the cybersecurity considerations that you're dealing with, the types of data that you deal with, the concerns you could have about that data. If you're working with financial institutions, or you're working with insurance companies, if you're working with a large amount of data with PII in it, all your employees have to know about that and know the concerns and risks associated with that, and what to do if people that you don't know are asking you for that type of information. So having policies and those controls in place, and then constantly connecting with your employees, definitely during this time period where people are working remotely, to reiterate those policies are in effect, and then to highlight and forward news about cybersecurity concerns and issues to keep people current and connected on these topics. It's critically important, definitely during this time period.
Thank you, David. I wanted to give out the second CLE code, which is telework, TELEWORK, and I've put it in the notes as well, which should be, if you're on the Fuse app, the bottom right-hand little icon there should pop up on the right side of your screen. With that, we want to just move on to our last segment about the enforcement of company and firm policies with employees working remotely. I believe, David, you were going to talk about the creation of the policies. I know we've covered some of this stuff already.
We did cover this stuff. Again, like what I think Mark talked about is the scope about who is involved and who's covered by the policy. Be cognizant of the infrastructure. Do your employees have all the necessary equipment? Are they to work productively while they're working remotely? Do they have all the applications installed? We use several applications for our integration of remote work to ensure that everybody understands how to use it. This is a pretty constant thing, especially with myself. I'm getting older. I'm not as keen on technology. Somebody had to remind me what TikTok was the other day. But as we move along, technology. I thought TikTok was an entire, I keep reading that the whole thing is a scam. It's a data mining right. Program from China. That's what the internet told me. So I'm afraid of it now. How do you? Zoom was another one. I haven't used Zoom until this crisis came about, and it has its own problems. I don't know if you've seen in the news. Yeah. But making sure that everybody understands how to use the technology that they have available to them. That's really important. And just for lawyers and also just in business, making sure people are working. How are you doing that? How are you ensuring that people are doing and keeping the operation flowing? It's that constant communication you need to have with your employees, or your assistants, or your colleagues, just to kind of reduce that. I think what's going to happen in the next few weeks, if we're still going this, is that increase of social isolation in the workplace, where you've lost those contacts with your people in the cube next to you, in the office next to you, or the people that you talk about, and kind of getting into that a drudge where you're losing track of your time. I think a lot of you would sit here and say, what day is it? Well, it's Wednesday. Or Groundhog Day. And so keeping track of your activities, contacting people, making sure if you're lawyers and in private practice or whatnot, putting your time in every day, keeping track of what you're doing, keeping goals for yourself, having accountability for those goals, connecting with your supervisors and your colleagues. Just to kind of keep that organization, the business organization, current and together.
And that's one of the goals of what we're doing here with the webinar. It helps us all work together and hopefully connect with our colleagues and clients and friends and who are interested in reviewing this. But one of the things internally that we've tried to push is more communication via we use Fuse, other firms use Zoom, some other use other virtual meeting, but just so you do get that connection where you are not just isolated, because that is a major concern, that you don't want to have employees feeling like they are all off on their own. It is still an enterprise, and there needs to still be a connection between everybody. So, Mark, I believe, were you going to talk about testing of the systems?
Testing systems. I mean, it's very important. Aside from, before we go over testing, just make sure your systems are up to date. Networks are running 24/7. A lot of companies have their entire staff, in most cases, working remotely. It's very important to make sure there's maintenance periods, security updates are being applied, there's vulnerabilities being found all the time. Testing systems, ideally before something like this happens, just to make sure that it can support the volume that you need to support, to make sure all the employees, or the number of employees that need to be working, can work without slowdowns, crashes, issues, and definitely testing the policies themselves to make sure that you're covering all the points that need to be covered.
And Mark, we actually had a question come in. I know we've talked about how to keep video meetings secure. And I think, David, you alluded to the issues that Zoom had. And I know I saw that, I think, on Law 360 this morning, some of the issues that Zoom had. And everybody's kind of grappling with it. But do you guys have any recommendations? And Brian, you too, anybody, do you have any recommendations on how to keep the video meetings more secure?
Password control.
Yeah, I would just make sure, and I think, Mark, we actually talked about this yesterday. A lot of the issues with Zoom was, they weren't password protected meetings or webinars, and anyone who had the invite or could find the invite was attending and presenting at these Zoom meetings.
Yeah, I mean, when companies are giving webinars such as this one, sometimes they put these links on their company websites, and that's being crawled by Google, and somebody can do a Google search and come up with a bunch of meeting links and just click on them and be able to just go right in without any password authentication and, wreak havoc.
Well, and you have to think about as lawyers, ethically, if you're doing a client meeting or something like that and inadvertently forwarded an invite, that doesn't have, and you don't have controls over who's invited and watching a web meeting that you're having, that's a concern of confidentiality and privilege. But all these things have to be considered when working remotely. It's just like Mark alluded to earlier. We would work from home on Friday or whatever. We're all working from home now 24/7, and some of us are working all the time. Just trying to keep track of what day it is a struggle. But
David, you sound like you don't know what day it is.
I don't. What? This morning I really didn't.
One additional point I'd like to make is
I know it is shave day because it's Wednesday. So
we lost the apocalypse beard.
I just want to make one more point. It's very important to make sure help is accessible to your employees. That way, if they have any question, they have a way to easily get an answer. If there's any roadblocks there, if somebody's in a hurry, they're busy, and they have a question about something, the easier it is to ask a question and get help, the more likely they will, versus, oh, I'm never going to hear back, let me just keep doing what I'm doing. It's very important that everyone understand how to use the tools that they're using to do their job. to make sure there's no data leaks, to make sure you're not doing something that you don't mean to do. So definitely access to IT help is important, making it
have readily accessible help desk. Make sure that the employees know how to get in touch with people via email, on the phone, however it is accessible remotely with us.
Especially for incidents reports too. You want them to know who to call if they think something happened.
Right.
Right. And then finally, we have accountability. And Brian, I think you were going to sum it up, but
just sure. Again, we're all in this together. It's a brand new environment. And I think from all levels of an organization, from management to employees, folks who come in and out, everybody needs to be accountable for his or her position. I mean, we all need to be productive while we're at home. We need to be in communication with our colleagues and clients, and we need to make sure that those of us who manage, that we are relaying useful and timely information to our employees, so that we can all manage this crisis together. And teamwork truly is essential right now. And one thing I did want to mention, I should have mentioned it earlier on, takeaway from this cybersecurity while working at home, it was the Bob Mueller quote that, there are two types of companies. There are those that have been hacked and those that will be. And it's just very important that we all understand what role we can play to helping our organization succeed and thrive during this period.
All right. Well, thanks, Brian. Thanks, David. Thank you, Mark. Like I mentioned, we'll shoot around a follow-up email with all our contact information to the extent there are any questions or anything that we could clarify. We've put the CLE codes in the notes. If you have not seen them, I think the key here is stay vigilant and be aware of the fact that there are a lot of bad actors taking advantage of this situation, which is obviously a disgrace. But that doesn't mean that you can let your guard down. And everybody stay safe, stay vigilant, and if there's anything that we hold on, there might be one question. I got a couple questions here. Yes, the presentation will be available for download. If you go to Bressler's website, you'll see on our COVID-19 dedicated page, there's a portion where you can click and it will say webinars. And we are going to be downloading them all or uploading them all to be reviewed. I don't know if it's downloadable from there, but it will be able to be viewed from there. Next week, we're going to be talking about virtual offices and how you can still conduct business in this environment. Practical advice from some of our litigators who have experience with doing virtual depositions, things like that. And how you can continue to operate and do business while everybody is, stuck in their houses. Also going to have some transactional folks talk about some of the difficulties that they've had, particularly in, something like testamentary, trust and estates type area, where you're going to ordinarily need to have witnesses and original signatures. So that's going to be next week, 12:30. And let me see, there was one other question. Oh, that wasn't a question. It was just a comment. And thank you too. Thank you for all attending. And if anybody has anything, please reach out to all of us. With that, have a great afternoon, everybody.